Cabaneri of the Iron Pussy, also known as After the Rain.
You mean Love After It Rains? Koi wa Amaegari no Yoni, which is a story about a high school girl who's working part-time at a family restaurant
called Restaurant Cafe Garden.
Yes, and she falls in love with her 45-year-old manager, and who has a kid, and she's very adamant about it. And she early on confesses her feelings and is just like, ain't letting this go. You either got to give me a hard no, or fucking I'm not giving up. And he doesn't give her a hard no.
He doesn't do either.
So
hence 12 episodes.
Yeah. This show, I enjoyed this show, but I'm also a little frustrated with it. Because it, first of all, doesn't exactly make satisfying progress in the relationship. And it's based on a 10-volume manga. So, like, obviously there's more to the story. It obviously continues past the point where we stop in the anime. And I don't know if they eventually get together or not, but it was just kind of like, the anime just kind of ends at a seemingly arbitrary point. I mean, we get to at least a level where, like, she used to be a track and field star, but she got an injury on her ankle, Achilles heel, and, like, she's not running anymore. And meanwhile, our manager, we eventually realize, was an aspiring novelist who has basically forfeited his dreams after a long life of not succeeding.
Yeah, and pushing away his family because he was obsessed with writing.
So he's been divorced. He's got a kid who's probably like close to 10.
We never get to see if his wife's hot.
No, we never learn about the ex. But like, where the show ends, and I mean, spoilers, I guess, but like, I don't consider this to be much of a spoiler. Like, it ends at a point where they're both sort of rekindling their desire to try again at this thing that they have been avoiding, trying to get back into. Which is fine, but like, it sort of feels like a foregone conclusion at a much earlier point in the story, so it doesn't exactly feel climactic,
No, it doesn't.
And meanwhile, the show lollygags quite a bit. It's very slow at times. It's very, like, tepid. There's a lot of sad piano music and very generic sad piano music. I would say my least favorite thing about the show is the music. The visuals are pretty on point. It's Wit Studio, which I assume is why you made this Attack on Titan reference.
I made it because also Aimer does the music for it.
Oh, okay.
But also, because it's Wit. And the girl, she's a Cabaneri.
She's cute like Mume. Not as cute as Mume, but she is.
She's actually has no curves whatsoever.
No, but she has a really beautiful face.
Yeah,
and,
she is really pretty. You get to see her in a kimono yukata thing. She is pretty perfect.
Fine.
Yeah, I like the aesthetic of the show. I like how it's kind of like worn, washed out colors and stuff. She looks pretty. It does get a little ridiculous that it rains in every episode. There's one, like, in the last episode, like, the rival friend, I don't know if she's a rival, like, the friend girl is just like, it might rain today. And it's like, bitch, it's gonna rain! It's gonna rain! That's a Rurouni Kenshin opening. Yeah. It should be the opening for this show. It should have been. It rains literally constantly throughout the whole show. And, like, fine, I guess, but, like, it doesn't, I mean, it has, I guess, some symbolic meaning, but, like, it's not like the tone of the show is, like, a rainy mood show. It just kind of seems to be, like, a thing. It's almost a gimmick. It's almost like a meme, how much it rains in the show. There's even a typhoon at one point. I don't know if it just rains all the time in Yokohama, if that's a thing, but it was raining constantly. It's like Oregon. But yeah, like, I really dig the visual aesthetic and the overall tone, but, like, the music sometimes was, like, a little groan-worthy. It was not, like, bad, but, I don't remember the music at all, besides, like, the OP and ED. It was just, because
every song was like I could hum along to it the first time hearing it kind of thing. Like, it sounds so much like every other sad piano song. But, like, I really liked the main characters. Like, the main girl is really fun. I love how headstrong she is. How she's kind of awkward and, like, standoffish for the most part, but, like, once she zeroes in on the guy, it's very much like there is nothing else in her universe other than...
in for the kill.
Yeah, and, like, I don't know. I admire her personality type.
I admire her balls. She had a crush. She went for it.
Yeah. She reminds me of you.
Yeah.
In the way that she handles romance, I guess. And the old guy, you know, I could relate to him on some level as an aging fuck who's a novelist. But yeah, like...
with a child.
Yes.
Tom.
I've got to... But the thing is that the characters are great, and when they have scenes together, those scenes are great.
Yeah, the scene after the typhoon where she had, like, run to his house, or I don't know if she ran, but she, like, walked to his house, and they, like, hugged. It was touching. And
all the scenes where they're together, like, I think my favorite thing about their relationship is that he is a really, like, wise old man. Like, even though his personality is, like, kind of, you know, he sees himself as like, oh, I'm nobody, I'm just some lame-ass old guy. Because, like, he obviously didn't live his dreams, so he kind of looks down on himself and is just like, just an old fuck with a kid trying to get by, you know? And, like, he's very shy about the relationship and everything, but his inner thoughts are surprisingly deep. And, like, the way that sometimes there's scenes where he'll be, like, monologuing in his mind, and it's clear that he's, like, writing a novel about the situation. And, like, that's apparent even before we find out he's a novelist. Like, just the way he'll describe things in his mind is,
yeah, it's, like, words that you'll never expect.
I had to go to the dictionary one time for a word. I don't remember what word it was. It was something that...
yeah, I don't remember either.
Means, like disorganized planning, basically. But, yeah.
I thought it was just, like, the suburbs were, like, they broke out the thesaurus, but, no.
No,
he's using big words.
He breaks out some big words, he has really descriptive language in his thoughts, and, like, he will occasionally dispense some really interesting wisdom.
Yeah, like, when they were at the library, and she was tagging along, and he's like, you shouldn't take, book recommendations from people, because then you'll just end up hating reading.
Well, because she asks him, like, what should I read? And he's like, yeah, you know, like, just pick the books you want to read, you know? And then she thinks in her mind, she's like, well, I should have phrased it differently because I just wanted to know what kind of books he likes, you know? Which is a great interaction.
Yeah.
Like, that, you know, it's like, on the one hand, she didn't get what she wanted, but on the other hand, she got something great, you know? Stuff like that is... There's some really strong dialogue, really strong scenes between them. However, there's also this other girl who's introduced, like, halfway in, who... she seems like she's gay for the main character. It's never, like, explicit, but, like, she's a former...
She's jealous. She's the jealous friend.
I don't even know if she's jealous so much as just... Jilted. That's a good word for it. Like, she used to run with the main girl, and so here's the thing. Like, we learn about the running thing, like, at the start of the show, but, like, it doesn't come up, really. It's mostly about her relationship with this old guy. Until, like, episode 5 or 6, when they suddenly introduce this other girl, and, like, we get her whole backstory with the girl where...
They introduce her really awkwardly, too. The episode just, like, starts with her talking to her brother, who the fuck cares?
We
literally he shows up again.
I was confused when we started the episode because I didn't think we were watching the right show for a second.
Like, she's like the wrong color palette for the show.
Yeah.
It's like all like whites and blues.
Racist.
No, it's not racist. She's Japanese.
She is dark skinned.
She just has a tan.
Although, yeah, like, it's later on she has less of a tan, so it's more implied that she's just someone who tans well in the summer, I guess. But, like, yeah, like, her and her brother are just introduced out of nowhere, and, like, there's this, the whole episode is, like, that her and the main girl used to run all the time, and they were, like, best pals, but, like, ever since her injury, main girl has not really been talking to her anymore. So she wants to, like, rekindle their friendship. She's like, tell me our friendship wasn't just running, right?
So she goes to the gacha and gets the special gacha for her.
Yeah, and I immediately was off-put because I had gotten really invested in the main relationship.
Yeah, because this came right after, like, a couple episodes of, like, really great chemistry between the two where you felt like you were actually making progress. Like, and wow.
Inevitably, it left a bad taste in my mouth because of the fact that this is it's based on a 10-volume manga, and, like, that's a pretty long manga. Like, that's a few years of running. I think it was 85 chapters, so, actually, let me check if it was... Yeah, okay, so it ran from 2014 to 2018. So, 4 years this manga ran. And, I'm guessing it was monthly. Does that add up?
Something it was like in Genkanai
Spirits. Gekkani Spirits. That's actually a exclamation
Never
point.
Heard of that.
We're far away from the screen, but
very far.
But yeah, like she's introduced very suddenly, and it made me think, okay, well, with a long-running manga like this, you have to find some way to make it keep going. Like, just the central romance, if it just consistently made progress, this story would not be more than a few volumes. But, like, I couldn't shake that feeling that this was, like, an editor sitting down with the author and, like, oh, the manga's popular, how do we make it go on longer? We'll have to introduce another character, another dimension to the story. But the problem is that this other running girl has nothing to do with anything. Like, her only connection to the story is that she is a former friend of the main character who wants her to get back into running. And, like, so she has no connection to the old guy, she has no connection to the restaurant, she has no connection to the relationship, she doesn't even know about it, like, she's completely a whole other side story.
And they did so well with, like, keeping her school life separately. Like, it being a reminder that, hey, this girl's from a different world than this guy, she's young. But they, like, didn't make us feel like we were back in high school, like this is just a high school rom-com. But,
right.
Like, then they add her, and it's like, okay, we're back. We're with the familiars.
Right, and, like, when you're with the old guy... because he is, like, an older character, he has, like, a richness of character, and he's interesting, and, like, their relationship is interesting because, it's like the interplay of her teen emotions and his older emotions is what makes them an interesting couple. And, like, there's a point where they introduce a similar side character for him, which is his old friend who has become a successful novelist. And when those two interact, it's really interesting because they have this long history together. They have all these, like, interesting opinions about novels. I was so sure
that the novelist, because they didn't reveal, like, his face for the couple episodes, I thought it was going to be his ex-wife.
Yeah,
because his name was Shikioriori, and he was, like, kind of, like, he didn't really want to talk about the fact that he knew this author,
right?
And they're kind of keeping it a secret. So I'm like, oh, it's gonna be the ex-wife, and
no, it's just some dude.
It's just a dude with the ponytail.
But like, his relationship with that guy was really interesting because this is a guy who has been a successful author. Like, he's really successful, and like when they meet up, they're like, joking about the book and stuff. Or like our guy tells him like, oh, your book was a little interesting, like they're like really harshing on each other, talking about novels and stuff, and like they have interesting opinions on novels that like this guy, like at one part he talks about how like novels are his babies, and or no, like a lover. He says he's writing a novel is like a lover, and then the main guy is like, oh, I used to feel that way too, and stuff like that made me think about myself as a writer, and I was like, what do I think of novels or writing as? For me, it's more of a workout. It's like a pump. It's like getting the big cum, It's more like a sexual feeling, not so much like a lover, but just like a fuck, a quick fuck. I'm a sick fuck. I like a quick fuck. But, yeah, so then, and like there was even parts that inspired me to like, I started writing the next chapter of my own book because I was thinking about writing because of the way these guys are talking about it. But with the other girl, it was just like the most basic ass teenager issue imaginable. She's upset that she's lost a connection with her friend, and no progress is made on this front. It's always the same thing, and this girl has no other personality traits. Like with the novelist, like, you know, he's he comes off
as a complex guy. Like,
right.
In another episode, he's like shitting on himself. He's like, "Oh, my novel's actually not that good."
Yeah, because initially he's like, my novel's a masterpiece. Then he comes in later, and now that it's getting a movie made out of it, he's like, oh, it's just mainstream trash I made to appeal to the masses, and like, novels are supposed to be poison.
Yeah,
I think
literature is supposed to be poison.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is.
Which is great. But like, the running girl, like, we never get a sense that there is anything to her other than her like obsession with the main character, that like every time she's on screen it's just to be weepy about the fact that they're not friends anymore and that she wants her to come back to running, and it's like she has no other personality traits, so she's super boring, and she makes me want the main character to not go back to running. I'm like, don't go back. You don't want to hang out with this girl. She's not interesting. Focus on your relationship. It's way, way more interesting, you know? And
you
like,
fucked your ankle up. Like, there's not gonna be a future in this.
Yeah. But like, she just kept coming back, and it was always the same thing. Yeah. And so like, literally, I would go, like, in the same episode, I would go from like, no interest whatsoever during a scene with that girl, and then the second that our main character and the old guy started interacting, I'm suddenly like wrapped up in it, you know? And it was like, wow, it really feels like some other shitty show just got like injected into this one. And like, ultimately I gave this like a low 7. Like, I would say it was, you know, it was good, but not amazing. But like, I could literally see if you just cut those scenes, my score would go up to like a high 7. And if the relationship had progressed, or like, if this was longer, I mean, I'd like a second season, because I'd like to see where things go. Although, it annoys me that the story is as long as it is, because it doesn't seem necessary. But, like, if it had reached a conclusion, I might have even given it an 8, you know? Mm-hmm. But, like, just the fact that there were so many scenes where it just felt like it was slow and plotting and talking about characters I don't care about and not really progressing the main relationship fast enough. And, like, I understand that it should be difficult, because obviously this is like a forbidden love, you know, on some level. And like, it's addressing that a lot in the early part of the show, but then it kind of gets to a point where, you know, they are kind of going on dates, and they're seeing more of each other, and, you know, she's kind of developing a relationship with his son a little bit, like, you know, helping him learn to run.
My favorite parts of the show is the relationship between the main girl and the son, because I thought those scenes are like really heartwarming, and she did things to kind of like make his life better. Like, she cooked for him, she helped him take care of his pet hamster, and then she was like teaching him how to run, and she's like obviously putting forth an effort to try to be like a good role model to this kid. And I always thought those scenes were really fun, because like, you don't really get a whole lot of that, and she's like such an outsider to be having an effect on this guy's son.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, if we're not going to see any progress, like, on the romantic front, at least we're seeing, like, progress in the home.
Right.
Like, because, you know, my problem with the show is, like, I'm seeing right here, it's a seinen. Like, it's aimed at adult men. If this was for girls, it would be way more smuttier, and they would have fucked.
Right.
It would have explored, like, the aftermath.
It was annoying that it, like, has that, like, anime thing where... Yeah, like you said, it's funny because whenever we talk about stuff like this, I feel like a lot of people will write this off as saying, like, it's very Japanese. Like, oh, well, you know, they don't just fuck on the first date in Japan. And yet, if you read shoujo, they fuck on the first date.
They
always fuck. There's always sex. It's always explicit. And, like, obviously that shit happens in Japan. It's not a totally chaste society. It's more about, like... Japanese storytelling, not reflective of Japanese life. And I feel like shoujo is more often reflective of, like, what society is actually like. And, like, this felt as though it was like, man, it's so slow moving. More so, the main relationship going slow is not too much of a problem because of the forbidden love aspect, but, like, there's this one blonde girl, at the work who likes this other guy. And, like, they just have such a, like, innocently slow-moving, chaste relationship, even though, like, she is completely in love with him. He would immediately get with her if she said anything. And it's just, like, there's no intrigue in drawing this out any farther. Like, not to say that they, like, put a lot of focus on it or anything, but it's just, like, they could have hooked up at any point, and it would have been more satisfying than just continuing to remind us.
Over and over again and having the same scene. Like, there's a scene where she cuts his hair, and then when the show's ending, there's a scene where she cuts his hair.
Yeah.
And she cries, and it's like...
Just fuck already.
It's like, okay, I get the sentiment, but I don't particularly care about this character. She's annoying. She hasn't done anything. Another thing I didn't like about this show was, like, there was the rival love interest, like the chef that works with her, who's, like, really kind of creepy. And they go...
I don't know if I would consider him a love interest. He's just a weird, rapey guy.
Yeah, he's Vic Mignogna.
He is literally... He does literally Vic Mignogna her in the show. He just, like, suddenly, like...
If this was dubbed, it'd be Vic Mignogna.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Just, like, I would pay
for that. I would let him come back into the industry just to voice that character.
Yeah.
Well, what did you hate about the rapey guy?
Just that it was never addressed again. Like, there was a whole episode about them going on this uncomfortable date and him, like, it's not going to work out between you two, and, like, I'm going to tell people and all this stuff, and then she goes on to a date with her manager after that, and then it's like they have, like, an awkward scene in the break room, but, like, he's still there, he's still working there, it's never addressed, like, oh, hey, somebody you're employing, like, grabbed me and is, like, creeping me out or anything. It's just, like,
I mean, that's
they
realistic.
had the episode.
It's exactly why
I don't know, but they never made the guy
long.
Like, continue to creep on her.
No, it is weird how he just like, kind of exits the story.
Yeah, it's just like, it was just in an episode. They kind of explored that, but, like, if they wanted to handle it more realistically and wanted to be more dramatic, they could have kept including that as, like, a subplot. Having
it would have been
like,
more interesting than the other girl.
Maybe conspiring to stalk on them or trying to blackmail them or something. It's just like, he's just in the background, and sometimes you'll see him, like, in, like, a group shot, and it's just like, what is he doing? Like, he was, he was
important briefly.
Yeah, I care more about him than the blonde-haired girl who cuts people's hair.
Yeah. With
no personality.
It was just kind of like, I feel as though a lot of those loose ends would have eventually been tied in the manga, but, like, watching it as just a one season, it's like, you just feel very dissatisfied with a lot of the side stuff going on. And it, like, again, if there was a second season, if there was a continuation, I might raise my score if it made satisfying progress, if it stopped dilly-dallying and, like, just, started resolving everything, then I would be happy with that. I'd also be terrified that it wouldn't do that, and it would be like Kimi ni Todoke season 2.
I would be quicker to pick up the manga than even give a second season a chance. I didn't really... Like, it had a strong first episode. I liked the aesthetic. I really liked the idea of a relationship developing between an older and a younger person in a work environment, and how, like, a realistic kind of approach to it. I liked that idea, and I liked some of the things the show did, and I liked some of the characters, but, I also thought it wasn't that great. It was a romance anime. It was pretty slow. Nothing too special.
It's just alright.
I'd like to see where it goes, but I'm not, holding my breath.
Well, I think that's enough to say about Love After It Rains! I'm gonna have to play you that song so you know what the hell I'm talking about. See you in the next one.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Alrighty, we watched the first 4 episodes of Lupin the Third Part 5, and I feel like something I haven't really done in this season of Finish or Fail, but I think I did a few times before, is just putting this one on hold. I don't really feel like I want to permanently drop it, but I don't feel very strongly about this season of Lupin. It's one that there's interesting things in it, but, like, it's just not nearly as good as, like, Lupin at its height. And I don't think you've seen any of Lupin the Third.
Not besides this.
So what do you think of this, just watching it with only, like, my cursory knowledge of it that I've given to you?
You can tell there's, like, a lot of, like, fan service kind of in it, and that's cool and stuff, and I'd like to probably be more familiar with, like, the original and different variations of it. I liked, and also kind of sometimes thought it was a little corny, the way they...
It is always very corny.
Well, yeah, just, like, the way they kind of mesh modern technology into the show. Like, they had the one girl character who used to be, like, a Red Room girl. Like, she used to be, like, a child porn girl, and then she,
she's basically an autistic Zoomer who they've
brought... Who drinks Huel.
Who drinks Huel and is all about technology. I mean, the whole theme of this season is basically, like, how would Lupin the Third work in this modern world with all of the crazy tech that exists today? And, like, if all of it was being used against him.
Yeah.
And...
Cryptos.
I definitely think that, like, starting you on this season is generally a bad idea, because this is one of the least independent Lupin seasons, I feel like, because historically Lupin the Third has been almost exclusively episodic. It's always been mostly just about, like, Lupin, every episode he has something he's gonna steal. It seems impossible... Zenigata's on his tail, Fujiko's double-crossing him, and how are him and his boys gonna, like, make this thing possible? And, like, it's mainly about... The first half of the episode is, like, the setup. There's some kind of twist where it seems like he's not gonna make it, but then in the end, it was all according to Keikaku, and he has some kind of crazy way he gets out of the scenario. Season 4, or Part 4, rather, because the older shows, like... Part 2 is like 150 episodes, so it was at one point like a long-running show that was just on weekly. But over time, there was a very long stretch where Lupin mostly existed as a film series, and they make a movie every few years, and the movies are all just like extended episodes of the show. So like, it's always just been these episodic stories, but this is... Well, Part 4 had an overarching narrative going on in the background that started to take up more of the screen time later into the season. This one is just straight up, like, one continuous story. And I don't know if that's ever been done to the extent it's being done in this season. So, like, it definitely feels to me like there's an expectation that you will have seen Part 4 to, like, get acquainted with Lupin as a general series. And then this part...
When did Part 4 come out?
Just 2 years ago, because I had that on my top 20 of 2016. So, and Part 4 was way more aesthetically interesting. It had a really cool art style. It was set in Italy, and it had all these, like... It was very Italy-themed, you know? But it was generally pretty typical Lupin stuff. You know, it had some new characters that it introduced. It had, like, new ideas and stuff, but it was mostly a traditional style. This one is definitely going out of its way to, like, do something new, where they're like, hey, we had a season of traditional Lupin, now let's have a season of, like, you know, a continuous narrative, which is a very modern type of TV idea, you know. Obviously, animes had continuous narratives for a very long time, but, like, you know, we're in the era of the continuous narrative TV program, and this one is all about, like, all this modern technology and shit. And so the overarching plot is basically that this guy has created the Lupin game, where they've put this huge bounty on Lupin and anybody can collect it, and he's basically under constant, like, drone surveillance. It's been blown up on the internet, so everybody's after Lupin. And I felt like episode 2 gave us some...
They had, like, a knockoff YouTube and Twitter and everything.
Yeah. Everything's there. Any modern technology is there. You know, anything that could be used is used. But, like, there's a bit in episode 2 where Lupin turns the tables on everybody by, like, going to an, like, backwater foreign country and then, like, tweeting constantly everything he's doing to try to, like, downplay the importance of this game, like, make people lose interest. And that was cool. But as it's gone, it just is basically Lupin on the run from the whole world. And, like, what this causes is almost constant action scenes, and action scenes are the worst part of Lupin the Third in general, because the action is mega corny. And so, like...
There was one scene in episode 2 where I assume these are just, like, characters from old old episodes and stuff, but they had like a guy with a fishing pole, and then they had a guy in an F like Formula 1 car.
Suddenly in the forest, and like you just see like an F1 car go
and like you see all the shit in like 2 seconds, and it's like,
yeah, it seems like
that's goofy.
I haven't seen enough old Lupin to know if all the like League of Assassins people are from old seasons, but it seems likely since they're all people who the characters recognize and like who have really weird dated gimmicks.
They killed them all though. He like killed everybody in the Rat Clan, so it's like, are these disposable like side villains?
I'm sure they are, because like I don't think that Lupin, it's the kind of thing where it's like all of the stories are somehow set at the same time. Mm-hmm. You know, like he's never aged. There's never been like a real, like sometimes characters will make reference to the idea that time has passed, but it's not in reference to any specific moment that already existed. Like in this one, Lupin and Fujiko have been broken up for 4 years. They haven't talked to each other in 4 years. Well, like, that was also kind of the case at the start of the last series, and like, so how long anything's been since anything is based on like just a general cultural sense of Lupin more so than actually what's happened in Lupin. Because just an impossible amount of shit has happened. There's been so many episodes, and there's been no real sense of time progressing or anything. So it's a weird, it's kind of a meta series in that regard, where like it's playing around with the idea that you would know the baseline of the characters, which is not hard to learn in any other season. Any other season, if you watch like 5 episodes, you know more than enough about Lupin to get into the swing of things. But this one is the only one where it feels like you needed to have seen something else first in order to really appreciate it.
I mean, I feel like I understand what the characters all are.
Right. Like, they're not
just
difficult.
From watching a couple episodes of this, and just from like having a basic understanding. Like I know who Fujiko is, obviously.
Yeah, it's kind of like what's great about Lupin is how like plug and play it is, that like you've got all these characters who are very archetypical, but they're always fun to watch because they've got just really strong personalities and they have great chemistry together, and so
and aesthetic.
Yeah, and so no matter what situation you put them in, it'll always be fun to watch these characters. And, like, there's always been, sometimes the stories are really corny. You know what, this isn't your first Lupin, because we also watched, the Jigen Daisuke film.
Oh, yeah.
The, like, OVA. Yeah. And, you know, I've told you a bunch of stuff about it, but, like, that OVA had the same aesthetic as Part 4, where it was, like, really fucking, it's the Takeshi Koike, the guy who made Red Line, like, his style, which he introduced to Lupin back with a woman called Fujiko Mine, which is another 13-episode short series that's kind of like a offshoot that's more focused on Fujiko. But yeah, so, like, the thing about this season is that I am interested in the idea of a Lupin season with a continuous narrative, with all this modern technology, but it's so, like, it's very stilted in its directing. It's like, shots seem like they last too long, and, like, the action is not really engaging. And in Lupin in general, action scenes are usually a hail of gunfire and characters running away and nobody ever getting hit. And, like, it's just not believable because it's not grounded enough. So, like, the most exciting Lupin action scenes are usually car chase scenes or, like, crazy shit where it's just about how many insane things happen. When it's just, like, you know, helicopters shooting at them and they're running through hails of gunfire that should be hitting them and they're not, it just takes you out of it. And this show has too many seemingly serious action scenes. It doesn't have enough of the caper element of Lupin coming up with an insane scheme. You know, it's almost always just like he has something hidden in his hat that lets him get out of a combat situation instead of, like, really having to think his way out of something. And so, like, I don't know, it just doesn't have enough of what I really come to the series for, and, like, it leaves me feeling like I'd rather watch some other Lupin. Like, there's so much of it that if you really want to have, like, the experience of watching Lupin the Third because you're in the mood for that, any other season will give you a more, like, potent hit of that Lupin feel, or any of the movies or anything. Like, watching this, it's almost like a curiosity, and if I had seen all the rest of it, I think I'd be more interested. Like, if I didn't, there are probably plenty of people who do care about Lupin who have seen literally all of it, or at least a lot more of it than I have. So, like, I see this being something that if there was one day in the future, a time where I decided to binge all of Lupin, or to, like, make my way steadily through every season of it, at some point I would need to watch this, because I would need to complete everything. And I like Lupin enough that I could see doing that, but not enough that I could see prioritizing it, It would have to be, like, in the future when I've become so jaded that I can't watch modern anime anymore. That will be the time. But yeah, this leaves me... It leaves me feeling like if I watched it, it would be more because I want to watch all of Lupin than because I think this show is particularly good. And I'm sure it will have some neat ideas in it, but there's just way too much, like, dumb action scenes, and the action scenes are just bad. Especially just because the directing is not that strong and the aesthetic's not that strong. And while I like this new girl enough as a character... The new girl who they introduced in Part 4 was, like, my favorite character in anime that year. So she's, like, not even a comparison. And, I also would love to show you that season. Like, I'd be more inclined to rewatch Part 4 than to finish Part 5. So, yeah. That's why I'm putting this one tentatively dropped, on hold, whatever. Next show. Alright, we watched the first episode of a movie called Shikioriori, which was...
A Chinese anime?
I don't even know what to... like, how to qualify this, because it's a film that is Japanese, but is set in China with a Chinese director. It was, a collaboration of Howliners, who do basically all the Chinese collaborative anime stuff, and Comics Wave Films, which is Makoto Shinkai's personal studio, who's made all his movies.
Made for Netflix.
And it's very surreal because it is just a Makoto Shinkai movie as interpreted by a Chinese director about China. Which is mega weird, because, like, it looks entirely like one of those movies, because, it's made the same way. It's got the same, like, highly digital, highly shiny, sheeny style, with, some pretty... Weirdly, like, character animation's not very good, but when they're animating, like, food, they put a lot of effort in.
Yeah.
But... It's broken up into 3 segments, not unlike 5 centimeters per second, and it's a bunch of nostalgic stories that are told with, like, tons of narration, which is exactly what Makoto Shinkai's early movies all are. They're always, like, just someone, like, giving a moody, retelling of, like, some event from their life, or just, like, telling you about their feelings towards these events, and, nostalgic feelings and emotions, except that it happens to be about growing up in China with different characters. So, it's a Chinese knockoff of a Makoto Shinkai movie made by his own studio? I don't know how to fucking even describe it. But, we watched the first one, and... It was about a kid who grew up eating this Sanshan beef.
We've got to address the elephant in the room.
Yes.
We've got to talk about the soy boy conspiracy that
Absolutely.
Netflix is pushing. So very clearly, it's like
Sanshan beef.
Sanshan beef. That's what he says.
Beef food.
And he just refers to the dish because he's talking about it. The theme is that this dish reminds him of his family and, like, all this shit. He calls it beef food because the most important ingredient in the dish is the fucking beef.
He says the word beef, like, literally 50 times.
But they don't say, they never translate it as a beef dish.
No.
They don't never even say the word beef.
I don't think beef appeared in the subtitles.
They say meat. But they refer to the dish as just, like, rice noodles or noodles. And this is because not everybody eats meat, right?
I don't know
and
why.
they're like, oh, Well, we can't say beef because that's gonna, we're gonna alienate
maybe
people.
I'm confused. Maybe there's a word for noodles that sounds like beef.
No.
But,
they definitely just didn't want to call it beef because they thought that'd be confusing because, typically we don't eat noodles with beef in the West, although there's lots of dishes that use noodles
with beef all the time.
Spaghetti and
beef
meatballs.
Noodles is one of my favorite
noodles.
things.
I make beef noodle soup all the time.
Fucking pho is a beef soup.
Beef ramen. It's common to eat beef, but it's not good. Netflix does not want to promote beef. They want to promote the soy boy industry. So they call it noodles.
It's so fucking weird.
It was so annoying.
This actually happened. We started watching this, and within the first, minute of his backstory, he says beef 6 times. Because, first of all, he refers to the dish as Sanjan beef. But they always translate it.
Delicacy. If you're living in the countryside and you don't have a lot of money, that's probably a fucking delicacy. It's exciting to get to eat the beefu.
Yeah, the beefu.
The beefu.
The beefu.
That's his memory.
The beefu.
His memory is the beefu. And they show the dish over and over again, different interpretations of the dish, and they all have different types of vegetables, all different types of noodles, but they all have the motherfucking beefu.
Yes, and they always translate it as Sanjan noodles,
or
even though he's clearly saying Sanjan beef. But it's not just when he refers to the dish. He keeps every time they'll translate something that'll say when we we would slurp up all those wonderful flavors. What he's saying literally is we would slurp up that delicious beef. He would just say beef continually in every sentence, to the point that it was fucking hilarious how often he says beefu, because he keeps saying we would eat that beefu and it would be such good beefu, I love that beefu. That beef, he would refer to the dish as just beef. Not even any other component.
It's really upsetting because, beef has a lot of connotative meanings that you can derive out of it. Beef, maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's a delicacy, maybe it's, carnal, beefu. Pussy.
Speaking personally as somebody who... I grew up in in spite of the fact that my mom is a vegetarian, it has been since 2001, I am the type of person who only regards meat as food. Anything else is not food, it's just garnish for meat. I consider myself to have eaten if I have consumed meat in addition to something else. And I think a lot of guys think that way, and especially, that is a prevalent way of talking about food in Japan, and... I don't know so much about China, but this movie was all in Japanese, and it was originally in Japanese, oddly enough. But when you think about Cowboy Bebop, where he's oh, how can you call it bell peppers and beef when there's no beef? Or you think about any hot pot scene where they're all fighting over the beef because beef is expensive. Beef is the beef is noodles, dirt cheap, mushrooms, dirt cheap, bell peppers, dirt cheap, beef, not dirt cheap. So that is the sticking point of eating this meal, is that you get to enjoy beef. So he says it constantly, and they translated it 0 times as beef.
Yeah. The soy boy agenda.
It is definitely the soy boy agenda. So that was what was distracting us through the whole first part, and the main reason I was watching.
It was a fascinating thing, because it's okay, are they ever going to translate it as beef? Is there a reason they're not translating it? We went to
translators, by the way. I went to Google Translate, and I kept typing in beefu in different languages, and trying to figure out if it meant something different. No,
they just didn't.
It's the English word beef.
They didn't want the connotation.
Beefu.
They wanted you to think noodles, because it's it's a Chinese. It's we don't want you to think about beef because we're soy boys. We want you to think about noodles.
So eventually we made it to part 2, and it was about a fashion model, and I completely lost interest when there was no more beef. I was where's the beef?
Hot. I was kind of
I mean, this movie is it's very, moody and boring.
I don't know.
I understand that there's definitely an appeal to this. It definitely has some element of inherent social commentary, which is the main reason for these types of nostalgia stories is like what they tell you about life in that place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like, so it's like, yeah, there's this ongoing sort of theme in the first one about how, you know, these people from the people who served the Sanjuan beef were from Beijing, and it was like a famous chef who had moved out to the countryside to just like serve beef to random people, but then like they end up getting sort of, for no one really knows why, but they shut down and they go back to the city. And then like there's a thread of like small businesses shutting down as we see like this factory sort of growing, and then eventually the factory shutting down and some of those businesses going back, and like over the course of this kid's life, it's all in the background.
A really processed like Chinese restaurant like you see here in the West.
Yeah, he goes to just like some, you know, like fast food place that serves noodles. That reminded me a lot of I think it's called the Noodle Bar or something. There's a place in the mall here. Is it Station?
Yeah, it's the Noodle Station.
It's really bad.
It has like a really high Yelp review, I think just because it's new, but it's like, this is like the most overpriced ramen I've ever eaten.
You can get like a $9 bowl of ramen that tastes like it was 3D printed.
And it's like, a shame because like there's so many good Asian restaurants near us. Like why would
legit,
you choose that one?
I totally, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of thick noodles, but if you had just replaced this with being about pho, I would have felt all the emotions, you know, that he was explaining.
But that's not a Chinese dish.
No, but like, it was just, you know, it's like very standard nostalgia. I hesitate to use the word normie again, but it's
definitely
that's
like,
what Comics Wave films are. Like, all their movies are normie.
There was
trash.
nothing not normie about it. It even had like a BuzzFeed food porn in it.
Yeah.
Wasn't appetizing. It had like
weirdly
rustic brown poop colors.
It's just because everything's too shiny.
Yeah.
It doesn't look real. I mean, it's almost like Ghibli food, but Ghibli food looks more appetizing.
Ghibli food looks lived in. This food looks like there's a fucking Instagram filter plastered on it while in animation. It looks weird. It's like one of the bad Instagram filters that you don't want to use too.
Where's the bifu?
It's not here.
It's not
here.
The bifu?
Try again.
Hashtag where the bifu. That's spelled WHEREDABIIFU. Where to Bifu. Holy hell, we just watched the 21st Pokemon movie.
21 Pokemon movies. I remember when the first one came out.
Yeah. Also known as the second film of the film series reboot, which started with Pokemon I Choose You, which we did not see, and which I've heard is weird.
Is that the one where Pikachu says that he loves Ash?
Yes, where Pikachu speaks, apparently. So we didn't watch that one. It doesn't seem to have any connection to this movie. This just seems like, you know, some Pokemon movie. Like any other, it's about Ash arrives in some town.
Ash is alone. He is seemingly only with Pikachu. None of his other Pokemon.
No companions, no other Pokemon. It's just Ash and Pikachu. They've come to this town.
Team Rocket has Wobbuffet back. I don't know if that's in Sun and Moon, but...
I don't think they have it in Sun and Moon. I don't think this movie's connected to Sun and Moon because it doesn't have the same character designs or anything, or any of the other... Because Sun and Moon is more of like a one-locational show. Yeah. Like, it's not an adventure the way that most of them are. So, I guess that this rebooted film series is just a way for them to make Pokemon movies with no connection to any of the shows and just be like... So that they don't have to be beholden to whatever's going on in the show right now, which is probably the right choice. Because it means that they can just focus on making the movie make sense as itself. And that's what is great about this movie. This is a great movie. This is probably the best written Pokemon movie ever.
Yeah, it's definitely very enjoyable. Really good characters. The girls in this movie are...
top tier.
Great.
So... Like most of them, Ash comes to some unique town that's got a legendary, that's
Seems
got...
like it's in Johto, because there's, like, only Gen 2 Pokemon.
Yeah.
And Lugia, like...
There's only
is the
one...
deity they worship.
There's one Pokemon shown, other than the new legendary, that isn't from Gens 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's one of the researchers' Pokemon. He's, like, the pink bug guy.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's all Gen 1 and 2, oddly. Our battery's gonna die, so we might as well just cut the camera right now and fucking restart later. Okay, as we were saying, Pokemon 21 is one of the most tightly written Pokemon movies to date. I would say I can't quite say it's my favorite, just because obviously nostalgia is a big part of my favoritism of the early ones, and also like the animation quality. It's not even the animation quality; it's just the overall quality of the film. I don't think is as high as some of the earlier movies.
Yeah, they probably don't have as much of a budget to put into it. It's not getting like an international theatrical release like some of the other ones did.
Yeah, I mean, when you think back to a lot of them, they went out of their way to look as like flashy and impressive as possible, and like the actual character animation and Pokemon animation in this is really great. The biggest problem with it is the backgrounds look terrible.
And they also have CG crowds and some CG Pokemon.
Yes. And it's weird because there's parts where there's great CG, like when they're doing like flyover shots or like the big smoke cloud that erupts towards the end of the movie looks great.
Very well, not like in the Celebi movie.
Right. But then there's parts where it's like a crowd shot of just the worst character model pedestrians imaginable. Like the most generic, shitty, oh god, why would they put that in there kind of thing. And it ultimately, like, it left me at times feeling like sad or upset that like there was such good animation happening over such shitty looking backgrounds. Because like all the backgrounds have this, like, filter over them that I think looks really bad, that is just to, like, give it a sense of being detailed. Like, obviously they were just not drawn in that much detail, but they put this gross filter over everything. And, you know, at times when they're trying to do, like, a really crazy piece of animation that requires moving the background, it looks just, you know...
It's really distracting.
Yeah. So, like... It's a weird feeling where sometimes you're like, oh, this looks great, and sometimes you're like, oh, this looks terrible. And especially early on, because it shows a lot of crowds, and like all of the main characters have really standout designs that clearly had like a lot of thought put into them, and everyone else just looks as generic as possible. So you'll have like a little girl running around who's got on like stockings and like little hearts on her shoes, and she's got a cute dress and like a hairdo, and then like the people behind her are
just, like really generic cut and paste,
shoulder length brown hair, t-shirt, jeans, and like en masse. And so you're like, oh gee, I wonder who's important in this scene, you know. That kind of fades to the back of your mind as you get through, you know, you recognize all the characters, you get used to seeing them, so you're not so much like, oh gee, I wonder which character who's on screen right now matters to the plot. Eventually you know, so it's not as distracting. And, you know, it also ramps up a bit as it goes, where, you know, there's better looking scenes in the back end of the movie, where the action gets more intense. But, you know, so like when I think back to something like The Power of One, that movie was way better looking, had just more memorable scenes visually, and it did the plot of, like, you know, hey, world-ending, bad, you know, Pokemon, legendary Pokemon causes massive problem for everyone. We must put a stop to that. Like, that's what most of the plots of Pokemon movies are. This one isn't.
Yeah, the second movie was better because, like, it felt more grandiose in that way. And also, like, it had all the companion characters and they were funny. Like, in this movie, Team Rocket wasn't funny. They didn't really particularly do anything funny.
They're only there to participate in the plot.
Yeah. Not that, like, Pokemon has to have that kind of humor.
I don't know. They did have one funny moment when when Jessie had said that she passed back the bomb to Meowth.
Oh, yeah.
And he was I was running in front of you the whole time.
It's still gonna have, like, Pokemon humor, but not, like, what you're nostalgic for. And I don't know how much of that is just, like, the dub happened to be funny for those movies.
True, because we watched this in Japanese.
You know, the dynamic between all of the main characters, it wasn't this, like, as strong as I think the original Pokemon movies would have. And that's fine, because I still really liked the uncle character. I still thought all the characters were believable, and, like, they did a good job.
I was kind of glad, because I feel like in most of the Pokemon movies, Ash's companions are largely useless. Like, they're usually just there because they are Ash's companions. And so they're just kind of around, and they aren't like given a special mission or anything.
No.
You see a little bit of that in like say Pokemon 3, where Misty fights the little girl, Brock fights the little girl. Like that's more useful.
Ash's mom gets kidnapped.
Ash's mom is important. But like I think of Pokemon the movie 2000, and like Misty is, you know, she has some emotional connection to Ash, and she does some things. Tracy is just there. Like,
oh yeah, it was Tracy,
no
not
reason.
Brock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Tracy.
Right. And so like, and that movie has some great side characters, but this one, instead of trying to once again be like some insanely epic story, it's more a complex story where there's a ton of different characters who are introduced who all have their own little narrative going on, and all of them are satisfying. That was what made it so surprising, is that the early part of the movie is just, there's this big festival going on, and rather than have Ash, like, meet someone who exposits everything about the festival to Ash, and therefore he knows what's going on, it was more like, just because all these different characters who we're learning about have their own thing that is all affecting each other. There's like a sort of domino effect going on, where, for instance, there's an uncle who's with this little girl. You know what? They never actually did what we thought they were going to do and said that she was going to get cured by the poison.
Maybe it was in like the ending trailer, the credit sequence where they had like kind of a resolution of all the characters.
We didn't watch all of the images.
Yeah, I mean, they do talk about that they're trying to make a cure for something. In
any case, we're spoiling that this doesn't happen now, but like, there's a little girl who's like sickly. She's with her mom and the mom's older brother who looks nothing like her, and he's like a big liar. And so he's trying to impress this little girl, you know, to make her feel better by telling her all these grandiose stories. Well, his lies end up getting him involved in bigger things going on. But like at one point he just makes up that there's some great legendary Pokemon in this area that he's trying to catch. Well, this other little girl who is like protecting this legendary Pokemon, you know, hears that, and she assumes that it's going to cause a bunch of people to go and try to catch that legendary Pokemon. So she tries to shut down the festival by taking the big sacred flame or whatever thing that like powers the whole city.
Yeah.
So, like, and then meanwhile, you've got this scientist who is creating, like, potions based on Pokemon powers, and Team Rocket steals one of those, that causes poison and paralysis, and they accidentally let it off up in the mountains. And then meanwhile, wildfires break out, and then there's hunters who are trying to catch Zoroark, what the fuck was it called?
Zerora?
Zero Aura?
Something like that.
I don't fucking know.
Probably.
So like, there's just all this stuff going on, and at first none of it seems connected, but then as, you know, as all of these plot lines run into each other, it creates this really chaotic scenario where legitimately it kind of felt like, I don't know how this can be resolved. Like, it's not so simple as go catch a thing or stop the bad guy. It's like there's a fire, there's a cloud of mist, there's all these different things, and then there's also the emotional issues that each characters are facing, where you've got basically everyone has their dramatic moment of
they all get a chance to shine and kind of like you know, stand up for themselves and move past whatever kind of baggage is holding them back, like the old lady.
Yes.
And the girl.
And a lot of it is like very subtly hinted at leading up to it, like where this old woman who is like, I don't know exactly what she wanted from the scientist guy, but like, she goes to see the scientist early in the movie, and he...
Well, she's also a scientist.
Does she work there or something, or what?
I guess that she probably just, like, needed him to turn a document in or something.
Yeah, that's right. She needed him to, like, just give this paperwork over, but, like, she accidentally gets a potion that has the effect of attract spilled on her. So throughout the movie, she's got all these Pokemon just following her around.
Like, they keep coming.
Yeah,
so many of them, too.
Just more and more Pokemon keep following her, and she's super pissed about it, but she's like, you know, I don't fuck around with Pokemon, not anymore. And so you're like, okay, what's going on there? And then eventually we find out that she's the one who built this giant, like, wind turbine factory up on this hill that they need to reactivate to disperse a counteractive cloud of Pokemon effect potion. And so, like, we learn at some point that, like, oh yeah, in her past, one of her Pokemon sort of sacrificed itself.
He died.
Yeah,
a
straight
Pokemon
up died.
And
it's great because it even though this scene, it happens very quickly, but, like, because we already have the expectation built up that she has some kind of past with this, it doesn't feel out of nowhere, and then we see it, and it's an emotional scene, and it gets its resolution right afterwards, but both parts are, like, so well done that I teared up a little bit at that. I was like,
Aww.
whoa, that's like the fastest 0 to ready to cry that I've seen in a Pokemon film, you know? Everybody gets, like, really good emotional resolutions. All of the plot points eventually converge. I think what impressed me the most is how much it actually uses the rules of Pokemon.
Yeah, like, they talk about how abilities actually kind of affect the real world. There's a Pokemon catching contest, and Staryu, who, the uncle guy he talks to the researcher and asks him what's the best Pokemon to help him.
Right.
He gives him a Staryu because Staryu has Illuminate, and, like, all the Pokemon come to Staryu.
Right. So,
and then they also have, like, orange berries and long berries and stuff.
You see, like, tons of items from the games, tons of Pokemon attacks, tons of effects. There's lots of moments where attacks are just used in creative ways, and none of it ever has to be explained. Like, I imagine that this movie would be really difficult to follow if you don't know anything about Pokemon, because, like, there's times where it would just seem like an ass pull, but, like, for instance, one part they're putting out all these fires in the forest, and then Togepi uses metronome and, like, does a surf, and everyone's just like, even the characters don't know what just happened, you know, in the context of the movie. And, like, there's a part where Zeraora is, like, falling, and all of these, like, sheep-type Pokemon who happen to be around just, like, all start shooting cotton out to, like, catch its fall, and just tons of stuff like that. Pokemon attacks being used all the time, you know, by name. It just felt like, at this point, the anime staff has just a better grasp on, like, you know, after doing this for long enough, I guess, they are more capable of putting all those extra elements in there and, like, thinking about that when writing a story. Not just coming up with a generic plot and then inserting Pokemon and its mechanics in, but, like, building a plot around how Pokemon work. And I also like that the legendary that they made up for this movie is not the central focus at all. If anything, he's just one more character in this ensemble cast who has his own motivations and his own past.
Weaknesses.
And, like, the situation isn't resolved just by placating this Pokemon. That is one element of this greater thing going on. And also Lugia's there. And, like, you know, it's well signaled throughout that Lugia is even more legendary and even more important in this context. So it's not even like, oh, this is the latest most important Pokemon of all time, you know? No, it's just a guy who's here, but Lugia is still one of
Lugia is an Uber.
Yeah.
Back the fuck off.
And the fact that this is clearly set, like, in Johto and we have Lugia returning is really cool, you know? It's like, we didn't have to make a new movie about Lugia, but we can involve it in, you know, a story set there.
I like the festival that they had going on. They, like, had a bunch of different type of Pokemon themes.
Yeah.
Like, Pokemon theme rides and stuff, and there was a Chinchou ride, and I was like...
you were like, oh my god, Chinchou!
So exciting.
So many Pokemon are on screen in this movie. Like, so many unique types. It was really nice. It was nice to get to see so many Pokemon and so many of them actually doing something, not just, like, appearing. So, like, in terms of being, like, a cinematic experience and having, like, the tone of a movie, it's not as strong as, like, the early movies. But, like, in terms of just being well written and being good at being a Pokemon movie, having lots of likable characters, like, way more memorable side characters than any other Pokemon movie has had. Like, the uncle, the Ganguro girl, you know, even the old lady, like, all characters who I could... If you asked me about this movie in 10 years, what was that character's deal, I will probably be able to tell you. And I could see rewatching this movie, too, showing it to other Pokemon fans. The scientist kid, also great. Ganguro Girl is my favorite because she has
such a great character design and personality.
And she had them thighs, and she was like a runner, so they were like, it made sense. As soon as she's like, oh yeah, I did track and field, and I was like, that's why you got them legs, ain't it? Yeah, she has a great scene. Like, everybody gets to be useful, like, equally. Even, like, Ash himself is just another in the ensemble cast. Like, I wouldn't even say he's the main character of this movie. It doesn't open with him. It doesn't really resolve with him.
It's just so you recognize that you're watching Pokemon, and so Pikachu can be in it.
Yeah, I mean, the movie being called Minna Monogatari, Our Story, is like a perfect title for it. It is not Ash's story. It's the story of all people in Pokemon involved, and that's the theme of the movie, is that, you know, humans and Pokemon working together are stronger than either individually. But, you know, they really legitimately make you feel like everyone's equally important. Human and Pokemon. Like, even the Pokemon are just as important as the people in what they contribute. Like, you know, we wouldn't, the uncle would not have his character arc resolve if not for Sudowoodo.
Sudowoodo's
fucking...
He's great.
There's an emotional character arc with the Sudowoodo. Usoki.
He's great.
Yeah. All around, really solid movie. Definitely one of my favorite Pokemon movies.